where I didn't have anything behind it. So some water was getting in. I thought it was still raining. It wasn't. My roof was slush. So I need to get it cleaned, and there's some musty smell now. I can get that addressed once I fix it. And I was going to fix it. I had to get some of this stuff. This kind of shingle that's stuck in all my garage. I was like, what? We get rain? How not? 28 hours.
I got another check.
Well, it's showing like 22 hours a night.
It just sits there, and the water runs off.
Yeah, it should be.
Okay, so there's all this stuff on it.
It's
It's going to rain all week, so I'm going to find something where I
So
am.
it's good.
To this script. Very good. I'll start to type with one hand. Okay, so this is the what's the Node.js session.
I've done that.
And I'll talk about what the session is about. First, a little bit about me. I'm the co-founder of the partnership. I've been working with Node and Domino for well over 20 years, from back in the early 90s, and working with JavaScript technologies and frameworks almost as long. And recently, I've been spending a lot of time working with things like Node, Angular, React, Google Material Design, Electron for desktop apps wrapping around your Node stuff, and then all the database stuff like Mongo Couch and Pouch, and then sticking stuff into the cloud and Google Cloud Platform or Amazon, whatnot. And the idea is it's all about work, it's been about integration. And so I found this has been really good talk about. So, what is Node.js? So basically, it is not what you might have thought from its name, a JavaScript library. Because JavaScript libraries are some such and such .js. No, it's not. It's a fully programmable server engine, interpreter. It runs and does stuff. So you code it using JavaScript, which is why it's JS at the end. And most of the time it's used as a web server, which is where you may have seen or read about it, stuff like that. And it can serve web pages, run APIs, it can be a networked application. That's a lot of IoT stuff. IBM use Node servers for the middleware bits of a lot of their IoT solutions, for example. And it's a really good candidate for being containerized in stuff like Docker. Very good for packaging up, moving around, very portable. So why are we interested? So this presentation is from the point of view of the Domino community. You know, why are we interested to know? Well, the main reason is, of course, because HCL and IBM are going to integrate with Domino 10 later this year. And so the idea is you'll be able to get Domino data in from Node easily. You can got your Node server, get into Domino, get data out, update it and stuff. And the idea is it's going to be a parallel development path. It's not going to take over from all the web stuff you've already got. It's just another way of extending your existing Domino apps, as well as extending out into new arenas as well. So you'll be able to extend it more easily out into mobile, new websites. You can create microservices if you're a lot of CIOs and CTOs very excited about microservices. This is a way of actually providing that from Domino very easily. And you can extend out to other platforms and allow other platforms in. So you can link to things like SAP, Salesforce, you name it. It just gives you like extra paths, really cool. So why are IBM and HCL using Node to do this? Well, it's a hugely popular web platform. I mean, everybody's pretty much heard of it. And it's part of the mean/MERN development stacks, which all the young people are using. And it's, one thing about it is it's really easy to add modules into it to do different things. So if you've got like a particular process you want to do, it's really easy. There are lots of resources and support out there. It's a very friendly community, the Node community. And there's you know, all the forums full of help and everything. And it's all JavaScript, so it works well with all the UI frameworks at the front, which all do the really sexy UIs like Angular and React and stuff. And it works really well with the NoSQL backends, the data stores like MongoDB and CouchDB. Because again, they're all based on JavaScript. And the really key thing is Domino 10 is going to be a JavaScript NoSQL data store, which is absolutely fantastic. So what is full stack development? I just mentioned stacks there. This is using the same basic technology from the back-end data right up to the UI, which means you don't have to do any complicated reformatting of information. You know, if you imagine the trouble we had with no-scripts text trying to migrate that from in and out, you don't have any of that because all the information is JavaScript all the way down. So you have mean and MERN, which everyone knows about, and now we're going to have Dean and Nerd. We can replace the Mongo with Domino. Okay, so now you're sitting there and you're a Domino developer and you're thinking, can I do this JavaScript? Well, if you've used JavaScript in Domino Web Forms, you may have done some client-side validation scripts, or you've done a little bit of jQuery over the years, or you're in Next Pages. For Next Page stuff, you've done your server-side JavaScript, then you're going to be fine with JavaScript in Node, because JavaScript is just JavaScript. And if you've not done too much JavaScript, but you've done loads of script, it really is very similar, just has a different syntax. It still has variables, arrays, loops, functions, all the same sort of stuff. Basically, it's just got a lot more curly brackets. That's basically what it is. But the thing is, JavaScript does have a lot of new stuff that LoadScript doesn't have, and all this new stuff is really great. It helps you do new and interesting things. So what about this stuff about Domino 10? So IBM HCL are providing a Domino connector module. I mentioned modules, I'll talk about those a little bit. So modules are what you add into your Node server to do stuff, and one of the things they're going to give you is a module to do the Node stuff. So you add it into your Node app, and that can read and update your Domino databases on your Domino server. And they're going to be using a new gRPC interface to the Domino server, which is like a super fast pipeline. And it doesn't use the domain Domino HTTP does. So it's a new way in. It's high performance, very efficient. So that's good. And you're going to be able to use the upcoming query language, the general query framework. And there's going to be a good session about that on Wednesday, 11 AM. John Curtis, the guy who wrote it. 10,000 lines of code. He wrote it all himself. So make sure you go up and shake his hand if you see him. Right. And they're going to provide your authentication systems, because you know Domino is all about authentication and security, and much, much better than Mongo and all that rubbish. And it's going to be based on IAM and OAuth, and again, they'll be talking about how that all works too. But hey, enough of my yakking. Node, where can I get it? How do I run it? Here we go. So the first thing you do is you go and download the installer. You go to the Node.js website, which is nodejs.org. You download it and you run the installer. I'm not going to run it now because I don't want to waste time. By the way, this is more or less an afternoon's workshop condensed into 45 minutes. So, right, here we go. So, it runs two separate packages. It installs two separate packages. The Node.js runtime, which is then installed on the machine, and it installs a thing called the npm package manager, and that's what you use to install add-on modules, and I'll use that during my demos. So, you install it and you run it. So if I'm going to drop out, skip over, and here we go. I've already installed it. I'm running Node. So it's not terribly exciting. That is Node running. So it's a console. It's console because it's actually a little mini server thing. It's running there. It doesn't do very much. Hit enter. Still not doing very much. But what it is it's a JavaScript engine and it's a JavaScript interpreter. So I can type in some very, very noddy, simple JavaScript. So 1 + 1 is 2. There you go. And I don't know if you've ever used JavaScript. He says typing with one finger. Console.log. Hello. 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 It prints out a hello. So you can do JavaScripty stuff in it. But of course, that's not even remotely interesting. So what we really want to do is run a script. Thank you. So right here we go. Right. Okay, so where am I? Okay, here we go. So if I do cd dev, so here we go. So I've got a demo ready to go, and I am going to type server.js. So now that, I'm going to take you through what I just did there, but I'm running a JavaScript file, and it's now running a web server. And if I skip over here, on my local host, I've got a web server running. Now, how do I do that? Okay, so here we go. This is the code, and I'm not going to take you to the slides, because I think it's going to be faster if I actually run through the code. So what you need to do in Node is you need to require what you're going to do. That's the word, the keyword, require. You require everything. So if you imagine the start of a load script, you go dim session as new Node session. So this is the equivalent of that. Const HTTP equals require HTTP, because we're going to be a web server. So we're going to require the HTTP. It's built into Node, you're going to turn it on. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, so now I want a server. So now you're thinking in terms of set database equals session.current database. So this is kind of like that, okay? So we're creating a server. Const server equals http.create server. So when you create a server, you want to take what it's going to do. Now our server, all it does is it's just going to listen for a request to come in from a browser. Okay, that's what it's going to do. And so the request comes in and we're going to send back a response. So you have two things you can use. One is the request, which is the REQ, and the second thing is the RES, which is the response. So these are things we do. We're going to ignore the request because we're not actually doing anything with it yet. So we're going to send back a response. So if you know anything about browsers, you may know that 200 is a success code, 404 means something's missing, and 500 means there's like an error on the server. So we're going to send back to the browser the 200 so the browser doesn't get upset. So the response status code is 200. We're going to set the header to say that we'll just send back a little bit of text. Obviously, you do something more sophisticated, you're sending back an HTML page or some JSON or something like that. And at the end, we're just going to send out the content, and it's the end. We're just going to send that back. And that will actually send back the hello world. So it's 3 lines of code to send back a response. And so now we've got our server, our HTTP server created. We've actually set up the server with what its response is going to be. And so the last thing we need to do is actually tell it to start listening. Because if we've created a thing, we're not doing anything with it yet. So we're going to tell it to start listening. So we're going to give it a host name, which is the 127.0.0.1 home for a local host. And we're going to pick a port. And that's one of the great things about Node. You can tell it to listen to all sorts of ports, which is how you can make a great network service, which is how you can link it to things like IoT. Anything that's out there that's broadcasting or listening on various ports, various devices, you can build a Node server that can then operate on whatever port you need to work it on, which is fantastic. And this, the last thing we do is do server.listen, port, host name, and then we're going to set a message, which is the message we saw on the screen there, just say that it started listening. So we now it's started listening, and we set the response, and we send back hello world. So that is 11 lines of code. And we've got a web server that's responding. That's all we need. So, I'm going to run the presentation from inside Keynote rather than me, so it's really back and forth, however it doesn't matter. So we'll run it. We're running the first Node server. I'm just going to skip through these because I don't want to spend too much time, spend more time on the code. So this is me setting in the require HTTP, the create server, describing how to create. So I want you to go back and read these later, or rather than spend too much time on them now. So success OK, add a listener, tell it to start listening. This is all we need, 11 lines of code. So here we go, this is the interesting, I'd like to go over this again. So what I did was, you may not have noticed that, but I typed node server.js, and now basically running Node, launching my server script. So it's all in the script. And then we browse through it and it says hello world. So that is a Node server that is responding to a browser request, which is all well and good. But what I want you to go away with today is the basis of a real app. So this real app you can then use to do anything. You can run an API on it, you can run a website on it, you can make it the front end of Domino server. So this basic thing that I'm going to give you today is going to be able to, you can actually extend that yourself and do interesting things with it. So we're going to modify our web server into the base of a web app. It's still going to do a hello world to start with, but we're going to use a thing called Express, which is like the other great popular module, and it's the E in Mern and me. It's really hugely popular. Loads of things use Express. Lost focus. So what is Express? It's an add-on module. You can read all about expressjs.com. What it does is it adds more sophisticated webby functions. Because you can write all this yourself, but why would you? Someone did it better. So use this. It's hugely popular. It's the E in Mern, and many other modules are built to integrate with it. So if you get used to this, and you get used to using it, loads of the things you see out there on the web will work with it. It gives you a head start in the world. And the Domino 10 Connect module also works with it as well. So, another good reason for doing it. So we're going to turn our server into an app. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the npm package manager, and it does almost all the work for us. It really does. It's great. It's absolutely fantastic. And we start by initializing our app, which is we type npm init, and I'll just do that for you. You can see how this kind of thing works. So if I break out the server will be running all this time, and I'm going to go up, and I'm going to go across to my second demo, and then I'm going to do npm. Oh, I'll just show you. I've got my server.js in here as well. I've got a copy of it. So basically, we've got server.js that just did that last bit. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do npm init. So this goes off to the internet and does stuff. What did I do wrong there? Oh no, I didn't do anything wrong. There you go, it's working. Brilliant, there you go. So what it does is it prompts you, line by line, for all the setup for your application. So I'm just going to hit enter, just because it's quicker. But you can type in stuff, or you can ignore it, take defaults. So package names, it's demo2, version, description, entry point server.js, it's guessed already that it's server.js. You can do Git repository stuff if you're doing that, author license, all this stuff. Is this okay? So I'm going to do yes, so that's created. Oh, there's an upgrade ready already. Another good thing about npm, it looks after you. It always tells you when there's upgrades available, stuff like that. Oh yeah, download that, be good, great stuff. So this thing that's scrolled by is our package.json. If you can see here, it's created that for me. You can create it yourself, it does all the formatting for you. Now this is the configuration of our app. And right now the only interesting thing about it is that the main script is our server.js. Done all that for you. Another interesting thing you might spot down there is the script, there's a start, node server.js. That's the command we just typed. So it's created it as a script, ready to go. So that's created our init, that is now an application. And if I do, basically it's got two files, package.json and server.js. But now, because we've got that package.json, we can now run this as an app. And you do that with another command, npm start. So npm is a package manager, and it's also like a process manager. It can run your servers, you configure everything in the package.js. This thing is going to get large, this file, as you add things to it. It's all managed for you, and you npm start, and that's going to start our server. Here we go. You can see it actually ran. It typed the node server.js itself, and the server is now running on that port. And if I hop over, here we go. Refresh, still working. Ooh. Okay, so now it's exactly the same, but now we're running it in a sort of app wrapper, sort of thing, npm wrapper. Okay, so presentation. What we're going to do is we're going to install Node into our project. And wait, you say, we've already installed Node. I've got Node installed on my machine already. But the thing is, you can install Node because it's so compact and portable. You can install it into your project folder. Then it belongs to your project folder, and then you can move your project folder around. You can container it, and Node moves with it. Also, it's the version that you installed. So you can control versions, and you can move it around, containerize it, and it's all really, you can have different versions running on the machine, all sorts of stuff going on. So what we do is we do npm install node now. Npm install ... is the magic command. You will see that everywhere. It is the bit that does everything, and eventually you're going to be able to type npm install Domino DB, which is awesome. So if I do npm install, oops, no. There we go. So it went off to the internet, found Node, installed it. There you go. It's created a few extra files. It's noticed that I didn't bother typing some stuff into my config.js, so it's looking after you all this while. And so it's installed it. So now, if we do ls, so we've got our package.json, which we don't have to worry about now, I'll come back to that later. And we've got a Node modules folder. I won't mess about going in there, but Node is in there. So it's inside my demo2 folder. We've got Node. So now, if I do, oops, npm. I mean, it's hard to tell, I'm just typing this, but that is actually running the node that I just installed, not my global node. So you have a different version, which is really cool. So they've got a server running, and that is now running locally inside that folder. Now you can copy this folder around. So for example, I created like 10 demos various bits and pieces to do with Node. And all I did is just copy the folder, copy the folder, copy the folder, copy the folder. Each one just runs one side, this side of the folder. It's fantastic. It's really portable. So there you go. That's that again. Still not terribly interesting because we haven't changed anything yet. For example, the main thing we haven't done yet is put Express in. So we install Node, we run the server, does the same thing again. Not terribly exciting. Now we have Express. Again, we type npm install Express. It's this npm install thing. Again, it'll go out to the internet for us and do all the work. So npm install Express. Here we go. Goes off, it does stuff, it all happens really fast. Boom, done. 50 packages and 47 contributors. Now, what's really exciting about this is there was one folder added when you installed Node. It's about 50 folders get added in that Node modules thing when you install Express, because Express, is based on all sorts of other bits and pieces. But npm knows all about that. Everything's based on everything else. It does all that for you. So it installs everything, finds everything we need. 121 packages in 3 seconds, which is pretty cool. So now, what is pretty neat is, if I move over here, okay, this is the package.json that's just been updated by those two installs. We installed Node and we installed Express. And you'll see the new bits is down the bottom there, it says dependencies. And we've got Express, it's got the version, it's got Node, and it's got the version. So as you add new things, they go in the package.json, and that's how npm, when you do npm start, knows to bring all this stuff in. Okay, so now we've installed Express, our app knows about Express, and we've got to use Express. And the great thing about using Express is it uses even less code than the previous one, even less than 11 lines of code. So that's what's so fantastic about it. So we're going to modify our server.js. I'm not going to type this because it'll take forever. But basically, if you remember, we had const express equals require. We had HTTP, so that becomes Express. And we're going to create an Express app. An app is a concept. It's like it's our set database equals session.current database. Again, the app becomes a thing that runs everything. It's going to be an Express object. And the bit that's different now is, before we were just listening to responses. I mean, we weren't really looking for what kind of, listening for requests. We weren't really worried about what kind of requests we're getting, but now we are. We want to be able to react differently to different things that come in. People send in, browser get requests, or they might be sending a post request if they're uploading a form. So we want to handle all these different things. And these are routes or routes? Routes. There you go. Right. So there you go. So it's routes. So there you go. Routes are pattern matches for incoming URIs. So they're like, if you ever configure the Domino web server, it's Domino website rules. Where you have you can map things to things and databases and stuff. So it's all easier to read, and you can control where things go and stuff like that. It's exactly that kind of idea. So these are routes, and you can have multiple routes, do all sorts of different things. I mean, effectively, you can have an almost infinite number of them, if you want to. And our one is going to listen for a regular browser GET request. So our app is going to listen for a GET, and / means the route of our website. Am I right? No, it's root, isn't it? Yes, root. So, and again, because it's all based on the Node stuff, it's kind of the same as the one we just did before. So it's got GET, we've got the request, we've got the response, and the response is going to send out hello world. It's a little bit simpler than the previous version, a bit more elegant, and don't pay any attention to that funny arrow thing. I'll explain that later. So this is our new code. We've got the response, we're going to tell it to listen, and that is almost exactly the same code as before. It's listening the port host name, it's logging to the console so we can see that it started. And this is only 10 lines of code, this one. And you run it the same as before, we've modified it, and we run npm start. So what I'll do is I'll just skip across the next demo. So I've actually done it in demo 3. So you can see the code. Where's my code? Demo 3. Oh, I see. There, that's what it looks like. So So if you remember, we had HTTP at the top, and we've actually added a new line that we didn't have before, but we've lost a couple of lines in there because things have got simpler. We've got the get. So when you hit browser, you get sends that response, hello world. You don't have to worry about the headers so much. You can do. It sort of does all that stuff for you, which is rather nice. So that's our code. And if we do npm start, Node server running runs Node server.js, and you'll have to trust me. That's the same thing now. The font changed because it's sending back in slightly different format. Obviously, have more control over it, but it's not just a plain text anymore. I think there's a P back around it. So that is a web server responding to a browser hitting it. And now we are using Express, and we have a route. So now we've got routes. Scroll. So what's different? What's different here? It's not just the same Hello World site now. Okay, something magically different has actually changed, even though you probably didn't notice it. Because we now have an app, and these routes are where we can put middleware in, and that is where we can really easily put business logic and our processes and the intelligence and stuff inside these routes. You can put JavaScript code in those routes. And so basically this is the structure of any kind of web server or network app or microservice or an API. You just have different routes doing your stuff on the server like this from 10 lines of code. So, what else could we do? So we can go and get update data, we can display a web page. For example, you can have an Angular or React front end, and that could be on the file system. Node can serve that up for you. We will be able to use the Domino 10 connector, and we will be able to do npm install DominoDB when it comes out. So when you install that, you install it using the npm thing, it will add it to your dependencies, and then you can start using it in your route processes to do intelligent stuff when people hit your page, hit your server. So what we'll do is we'll start by just displaying as a plain web page, just to show you how we might go about doing that. So a web page could be the base of the Angular or React app, which I've said. So the convention is you put everything in a public subfolder. If you follow the conventions when you're developing in Node, it means that whenever you go to tutorials or websites, look up stuff, you'll find that you understand what they're doing because everybody works this way. It's really nice. So put the we're going to pick a web page. We're going to call it index.html, and we'll slap it in a public subfolder. So I'll just show you what I did here. So this is my project. Here's a public folder. So it's just going to say, hey, I am HTML, just so as you know that it's different from the response that we were sending back before. So we know this one, so when you see that on the screen, you know it's finding this index.html, which is sat in the public folder. So what do we have to do to be different? So I've done a couple of things here, but I only talked about that third line there. So the third line says app.use, which is not like get, it's more general. And it says express.static, which is basically static files. So what Node does, you can get it to build web pages on the fly. You can get it to do that, you can get it to do almost anything. But what we're doing, we've got a web page, we're going to go and find it, and that's called a static thing, images, stuff like that, static, CSS files, static. So we're going to go, and it goes on dir name, so it knows where it is, and it's just the public subfolder of where we are. So it's going to find that and send that back. That's what it'll do as a basis if you hit the website. So I'm going to show you that, and I'll come back and explain what the other things are in a minute. So I'll just click that. So that was through. We are now on 4. So we started our server, so it's all running on the same port. If we come back and we browse to it, hey, I'm HTML. So now it's serving up that web page from the file system. So now this is what you would really traditionally expect to be a web server. It's now getting interesting. So hey, I'm HTML. So we're serving up a web page. Right. So talk a bit about routes. So your routes are how you get at different processes on your server. Once you've got to your your public subfolder, your index.html can fire off and go and talk to other files under that subfolder perfectly happily and do something. But if you want to do anything else, anything a little bit more intelligent, then you can add more routes. So the index.html is on the root of the server, which is just plain /. But what I thought I'd do for a laugh is if you were to type, localhost 300//2000, /something, I'm going to send back a different message if you actually type a different URL. There you go, app.get /something. So if I come back here, do something here. So it spotted that there was a /something at the end, and it wasn't that hard. I just had to type /something in the get. And you can use pattern matches here. You can use wildcards. You can use regex and stuff like that. So you can get really clever about spotting what kind of things you can catch, and then you can respond. So inside those curly brackets there, you've got res.send do something here. In there, you would put your function. You would write your Domino DB code, and then if anyone types DB /something, or like an API, you have /API /people, and then you would respond with a list of people or something like that. That's how you can build this stuff here. It's just like Domino web rules. And you can use pattern matching and all that sort of stuff. So the last thing I've done is I've added a third route here, and that's /start. And that's sort of like a catch-all one, which is a good idea. Because basically anything else that I type gets caught by that one. And that's any other part of the site. So if you always have that at the end, then people don't get ugly 404s and stuff like that. So if I go back here, and I type something, blah, 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 any other part of the site. And the thing is, whatever I type here, / I was supposed to be hello, but I fluffed it. But anything you type, you will get caught by that. So you can make sure that people don't go searching for strange URLs and stuff like that. People do try to find a way around the site. So you can prevent all that there. So that is your basic app. Right. So you can see how we've built our app. This is running inside its own folder. And it's got all these routes, and you can configure them with all sorts of URLs and paths and stuff to go off and do different sorts of things. So this is basically how every Node app starts out. There's my catch-all route, I was just describing that. Route. So what about Domino? Here we go. So, you're going to be able to install the Domino DB connector using npm install Domino DB, and what that'll do is that'll run through the process when it comes out. These you'll install that just in exactly the same way as we installed Express. It'll put it into your dependencies, and then it'll be available to you. And then you'll be able to use code something like this in your apps. I'm still under NDA, I think, so I'm not actually able to demo it to you. But you go and see John Curtis on Wednesday 11 AM. John Curtis, Wednesday 11 AM. He's doing a deep dive talking about the new Domino General Query Framework, which is the new query language that they've got. Now, it's not just for Node, the query framework. You're going to be able to use it everywhere, even from the command line. It's great. It's a syntax for searching, and the idea is you don't need to know about Domino structure to use it. It's kind of agnostic, kind of works at a more general level. It's really very clever, and so John will tell you all about that on Wednesday. But this is basically how the code will kind of work. So what I'm hoping you'll be able to see here is parallels to Lotus script. Okay. So for example, you've got a DOM server object being created by your require, the Domino DB. So we do a require, same as we did a require for everything else. And we're requiring the Domino DB, and we're creating a DOM server. And then you'll have a server config file, which will have all the details of how to find the server. And then we will run that, and that returns a server object, which is that server inside that bracket after the word async. I'll explain what this all means in a little while. And then that is going to do server.useDatabase, and then you'll have database config with some details about the database. So it creates a DB object, which is just like set database equals session.current database. And then you'll get some docs, and you can do bulk read documents, which is just one of the methods that they give you for finding documents. And there'll be a query in there, and the query will be the new general query framework, which is really cool. So again, we've got a collection of documents come back. And these aren't Domino notes document, script objects. These are going to be abstracted JSON objects. Again, John will explain all that. I don't have time. So, more on DoMinoDB on Wednesday, and that's it. Right, I've got 10 minutes left, so I have a load more content, or I can take questions. So what I want to do is, what else do you need to know? So that's a basic Node app built. Now I want to talk about some general JavaScript ideas and concepts. So it's improving all the time, new features, and the new features are all used in Node. So you'll see them in examples and articles, and knowing about this will make your life easier when you're starting out. Some things about how JavaScript works. I'm just going to run through these. I don't expect you to get all of this because it's going to be a lot, but I want to show you some of the ideas. You can come back and read it later, and hopefully give you, again, it's more ammunition for you when you start out on this sort of stuff. So, JSON. So all data we know is JSON, and that's JavaScript object notation, and you've been using it in JavaScript, whether you realised it or not, since you've been using JavaScript. It's hierarchical and nested like XML, which you may be familiar with, but it's much more readable. And it's very easily converted to and from strings, which is always useful, because it's basically all strings. And it works by name value pairs, so it's name, colon, then the value. And you separate everything by commas, and then objects are in curly brackets, which is why there's curly brackets everywhere in JavaScript. And then you have arrays, and they're in square brackets, which again is a little bit like Lotus script. And that's what JSON looks like. So it's fairly easy to read. So my JSON thing I've got a name is Tim, I've got an array with square brackets, and then there's a list of other objects with item IDs in them, and there's quantity 5, numbers don't have quotes around them. So that's a sample JSON object. And what's really cool about JSON is it can be passed around and used as parameters and stuff. So once you've got your JSON stuff, so you run your database query, it's come back from your bulk read documents, whatever it was, command, you will get a big, massive array of JSON stuff, which you can then loop through and do stuff with, process, display, analyze, whatever you're doing, show to the user so they can pick a document, and then you can act on that document. And so you can access it, you can reference it by name, and use dot notation to access or update properties. So it's a little bit like the dot thing you have in documents in Lotus script. You know, dot such and such equals thing, you can upgrade it, shorthand. So basically it works similar like this. So for example, I could change my name, my JSON.name equals Bob, and you would override it and it would fix that. And it's kind of dot that, dot the next thing, so the hierarchy works down. So my JSON had an array in it, so if you pick the second element, you can get the item ID from it, just by doing dot, dot, dot. Again, it's quite a lot like Lotus script. So familiar sort of ideas, so hopefully it's not too confusing. And there's a really good function built into Node and JavaScript in general, which is this JSON thing, and stringify turns it into a string, which is quite nice. If you want to send it somewhere, write it somewhere, save it somewhere. Because an object isn't a string, it looks like a string, but it's actually got strings in it, it's an object. Okay, so NoSQL is one of these buzzwords that's flying around. So NoSQL is not SQL, and it's used to describe databases that do not use table-based SQL data, so it's not like Oracle and DE2 and MySQL and that sort of stuff. It's stored in documents and accessed in collections using queries. So basically, it's Domino. Domino's always been in NoSQL. So you've been using NoSQL without realising it. And it almost always uses the JSON format, because it's JavaScript all the way up, all the way down, which is fantastic, so you don't have to do any conversions, so data just don't get corrupted. And with version 10, Domino becomes a proper NoSQL data store, able to fit to full JS stack, which is absolutely fantastic. One thing you may have noticed throughout my code, you have let and const. So if you've done JavaScript in the past, you've almost certainly done var such and such equals such and such. So they, in more recent versions of JavaScript, they came up with let and const, which are better. So var applies to the whole function. So if you var something, it affects the whole function. So that can be outside the thing that you're looking at the moment. So really easy to override things by accident. So let is like that, but it's limited to the current code block inside the curly brackets. It's all about the curly brackets. That means it's really hard to mess up the let. really hard. So if you use let instead of var, you're not going to overwrite things in for loops when you didn't realise, and stuff like that. And you can't let an existing let, so you can't override it by accident because you copied and pasted your code. And it really helps avoid confusion. And then const is for values that you're not expecting to change, because you get an error if you actually try to do it, which is great. So again, you can't overwrite things by accident. So I want to talk a little bit about these arrow functions. Right, so this is a new way of writing a function. Okay, so the arrow functions start with brackets and the arguments, then an arrow, and then the code. And that second line there. And that's kind of exactly the same line, not like, obviously, otherwise they wouldn't have bothered. It's kind of like function arg code, which is how you write a traditional function. It's very similar to how you write a traditional function in Lotus script. You just have to put curly brackets around the code part. So the difference is you use this a lot when you're working in JavaScript. And the this you mostly want to use, talk about, or be aware of, is the overall Node app. So when you use this, you want to know that you're talking about the app, not about the function you're in, because functions aren't a thing, and it comes up undefined. You think, why is it not working? And it's because you're using a regular function. But if you use the arrow thing there, it means that you can get at the Node app and act on the Node app from anywhere, which is great. It's more or less that. It's worth reading up on. So, 4 minutes to cover async. Here we go. So, people laughing know what I'm talking about. Right, so the thing with JavaScript is it's asynchronous all the way through it, and Node especially relies on this fact, because Node is all about asynchronous access to even to the threads that it runs. So asynchronous is things do not happen in order. That is not a technical definition, that is just what happens. So async functions, they go off and do their thing, and the rest of the code continues. So you may have already used async without realising it in Domino web forms, because if you ever use like HTTP requests to do AJAX calls, because they're fantastic, they're great for loading the rest of the page while you look up something. So your Domino web form opens, and you go off, you run an agent, you look up a bunch of options, say for a field, comes back down, loads the options, and that arrives a little bit later, but the user doesn't care because they've got the rest of the page to look at while this is all happening in the background. And that's fantastic. Again, fabulous asynchronous stuff. It's really annoying in code. So, here's an example. So I've got my lookup, get data async. It's going to go off and do a lookup, and when it's finished, it's going to say, I've got the data. Okay, it's going to print it to the console, so I know that bit's done. So I've got the console log, and I say start, and then I go and get the data, and when that's done, I would say finish. So you run it, and what do you get? Start, finish, and then 5 seconds later, it says got data. And so if you've got code to go after the finish bit where you go to use the data, you haven't got the data. Everything's undefined, the whole thing falls over. It's a nightmare. So, what do? So, you may have heard the word callback. Heard of callbacks? People have mentioned that for a while. So this is the original way that async functions allowed you to handle them. So basically you have an async function and then you have a callback inside the brackets there, then all the code and stuff. So a callback is actually a function that is called when it finishes. So it runs the function when it's done. And it usually receives the result of whatever the async function is. So you go and do a lookup, bring back the JSON array of documents, and then you pass that to your callback function. Okay. And it's really neat, but all your code has to go to this callback function. And then you want to do something else with it that's also asynchronous. So you've got to put a callback in that. And then when you've got that, you do something else, you realise that's asynchronous. So you've got to put a callback in that. And you get these nightmare chains of callbacks. And when you do, like, you do format code on in your code editor, and you get this massive triangle. All your code disappears off to the right, and it comes all the way back again, because it's just like, and then when it's down, you go, and you think, and you get error trapping, and you go, oh, it's all over the place. It's like whole pyramids everywhere, it's a nightmare. So that's been done for ages and ages and ages. So they came up, so obviously, you know, the powers that be in JavaNet, they came up with promises. So these are better. They're not super great, but they're more readable. So you'll see callbacks in code that you go and look up in articles and stuff, and you'll see promises in code that you go and find in articles and help files and stuff like that. So promises, what they did is they came up with this great idea of using the word then. So you add a dot then. So if you've got a function and it's a promise, you do what you want to do in a then. It's really deep. So do async 1, goes off, gets my array of JSON Domino documents, and then it takes the result and it does something else. And when that's done, then it takes the result and does something else, and then, etc., 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 etc. And you can do a catch at the end, handle the error, or you can mix catches in there. But it's kind of a lot more readable than code stretch, stretching. So, and you can create your own promises, which is really neat. So if you've got a piece of code that uses callbacks, you wrap it in a little bit of code, and you turn it into a promise. And then you can use your own lens, which again is great. So now, people weren't satisfied with that. So, they discovered that if you were to go away and get back a big array of Domino documents, you've got your array, and you do a promise, and you think, hang on a second, how do I look for an array of promises? I'll just run them one after the other. So what happens is, you run the first one, it does its bit, still doing it, start running the second one, does its bit, start running the third one, does it, oh, the first one's finished, oh, hang on, the third one's finished, now you start the fourth one, the fifth one started. And it's all out of order, and suddenly you find you've got this nicely sorted Domino documents, and you do something with them, and they're all over the place. Because they all finish at different times, nightmare. So what you had to do was you create an array of promises. So already this starting to get hard, isn't it? Right. Now I'm creating an array. It's not an array of documents. This is an array of functions. So I've got an array of functions, and I'm calling all the functions, and I think, oh, blimey, this is all the hard work. So, and the powers that be in JavaScript realise that as well. So they came up with async await, which I think is lovely. Now, you may recognise the word async and await from earlier when I showed you that Domino code. That's because, of course, the guys at HCL and IBM know what they're doing. So it's the latest way of having async functions. It's really lovely because you just say, I'm going to wait for it. And it does everything for you. And so that's now effectively turned your weird ass async function into a synchronous regular function. It avoids chains of callbacks, all this stuff, all these brackets and all this stuff, because it's just lines of code now. It's really elegant. And you can wrap these in a regular try and catch. You don't have any of this then, catch, then. If you see some examples out there, they're really nightmare. And if you get in some of your own promise stuff, you can await them because it just relies on the promise stuff in the background. It's useful to know that async and await is based on promises, but then as soon as you know that, you can forget it, and you can just do async and await. So I would expect most of the examples coming from HCL and IBM will use this, and it's just really nice. So that's not bad. Summary. Hopefully, I've given you an idea of what Node is, how to build a simple Node app, why it's important for Domino 10, and I've given you a head start, hopefully, on some of the important JavaScript concepts that will help you in your quest to conquer the world of Node. Questions, and don't forget, go to see John's session on Wednesday. Any questions? I'm writing a blog about this sort of stuff as well if you want to go follow that. Thank you. Any questions?
So you mentioned that Node is an HTTP server. Why does it not replace Domino's HTTP server?
All right. So in the strategy that IBM and HCL put together, it's a parallel development, because obviously you've got a lot of investment in the HTTP stack. The HTTP stack has got a lot of features built into it, like authentication and stuff like that. There's an awful lot of technology there. It's still very good. It's still very good HTTP stack, so for certainly our web forms, X pages, and stuff like that. And that is going to be a perfectly valid development. And for most organisations, that's probably the way it'll go. The idea with this is it's going to serve two purposes, I believe, which is one, it gives you another way of accessing Domino data using a open source. It's all open source, this stuff. Open source technology, which is very open, popular, supported, a massive industry out there. And it's a very easy way of bolting on and extending existing apps for starters and making sure that your apps are more future-proof. And the second thing, which I'm hoping is it's going to encourage all the millennial developers to come to Domino. I'm really hoping that'll do, because basically what I envisage is your millennial developer who's developing on Node says, I need a data store. So he goes, no data store, search. And then I'm getting old, Harry. He types Node.js or something, and then you get a list, and it'll come up Mongo, it'll say Couch, it'll say Cassandra, and maybe like the second or third or fourth one in the list will be Domino. You know, maybe, and he'll use it, and he'll read it, and he'll say, hey, look, this has got proper encryption. Hey, this has got proper clustering. Wow, this is amazing. I can do replication and all this. You know, it's all built in. This is astonishing. And I'll use that instead, or something. And then they start using it, and eventually it'll take over the world because it's much better than Mongo. That's why I do it. So there you go. That's why I drew. Yeah.
Did you say that when we use the download DB, we can get a document. We'll be able to get documents to notes. But then when we actually do a response, we'll be sending it back and using the download HTTP server. Is that what
It's not. It's intended to work parallel. It's got its own pipe in and out of gRPC. It's like this fast pipe in and out. It doesn't use the HTTP stack.
Yeah, but will that pipe then be used to use the download HTTP server for the responses to the client?
No.
So Node will go directly to the client.
Node goes. Node is like a server. So the client will be accessing the Node server, which is like a web server. In the background, the Node server will talk using the Domino DB connector through this gRPC superfast pipe into the Domino server. There's an extra add-on bit that goes in a Domino server to handle this as well. So you can still talk to the HTTP stack if you want, or you can ignore it and just talk straight backwards and forwards using this high performance link. I mean, that's my understanding. John will be able to explain much better on Wednesday. Sorry.
You have any kind of paper putting a Node server in production. Think about how to make the service, how to make it the ecosystem around Node.js.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't catch. Could you say that again?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you have any paper or any writing about how to make the Node.js go into a production?
Oh no, not yet, because I'm actually under NDA right now.
But in general, not necessarily.
Right. It's not yet in beta. Okay.
But
Beta.
Node.js is.
Oh, Node.js. Yeah. Sorry, maybe I misunderstood the question.
Yeah. If you want to have your Node.js server running as a service,
Service.
Windows service.
Oh, Node runs on Windows, Linux.
Yeah.
Production node environment, whether or not you've got Domino involved in
Right.
the equation, there are plenty of.
Do I have any documentation? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm terrible. Well, I don't have any formal documentation, but I'm writing a blog series on introducing you to it bit by bit, and I've covered most of what I've done today. I've run some workshops as well. I don't actually have anything, but I could take that on and write it, but I don't have anything right now. But the thing is, there's a million tutorials out there, and they're all very good. But yeah, there are. Yeah, the community is very good, it's very friendly. There's loads of really good Stack Overflow and all that. Any problems you have, there's an answer there somewhere.
Yeah, maybe a little follow-up with these questions as well. We have hundreds of Domino servers. Easy for us to deploy that. Just put it up. Just put it up. Server. You know, is there something like that? Or is it individual?
All right, so there's a very good question actually. So the question is, if you've got a Domino app, you can just replicate it around loads and loads of servers really easily. Is there an equivalent in Node? Not built into Node, no. Node servers that it's intended to run. It's a fantastic device, server product, because it uses this event-driven like threading thing. It's not multi-threading, but it basically it waits for something to happen before it responds, which means it wastes no resources doing stuff, so it can do a lot more than a regular server. So generally they're built to just operate on their own, but there isn't, not that I'm aware of, anything for replicating stuff around. But I'm sure there's a third party out there if you were to research for it. It's just file system files, you just copy them around, so that's the thing. So I mean, there's going to be tools. I haven't looked at that myself, I have to admit. That's a very, very good question, especially coming from a Domino point of view. I'll look into it. Yes? Right, okay, so that's a really good question. So, Node doesn't really have any security built into it. So you can download modules to do SSL and all that sort of stuff. And one of my bugbears is if you work with Mongo, it's really hard to secure that really well. But the guys at IBM and HCL have got an entire framework designed that uses OAuth and IAM, and it's integrated with Domino, and it's going to run through the Node server, and it's going to do it can manage all the authentication stuff through. So I don't think they're going to be talking much about that in that session, because that's mainly about the development stuff. But there's definitely, they're going to be talking more about it as they come through when it goes out to beta. Because this is all pre-beta, the Domino DB stuff. But yes, they've got an entire strategy for all the authentication that's going to work like Domino and make sure it's all secure. Which Node is not on its own, absolutely. Although we run really badly. So, sorry, thanks very much for coming, and thanks for listening.